Hey everybody, we're excited to have Chelsey with us today, and we're going to just give it a second for me to bring her in. Sadly, Nell won't be joining us today. She's just not feeling well, but we're looking forward to get started. So bear with us while we get her pulled into the Dual Live, and we'll go ahead and get started. For those that are joining, give us just a few minutes before we get started with Chelsey, and we'll go ahead and pull her into the Dual Live here. So give us a few minutes and we'll get started. Nell's not going to be able to join us today, so you just have me. But we're excited to talk with Chelsey today. Hi Meredith, how are you? Thanks for joining. We're looking forward to getting started here with you guys. We got Gracie Colonel in the house as well. Familiar names coming in. And just bear with us until we she's got to go live first, and then I'll pull her in. Sadly, we're not able to have Nell today. She's not feeling well for us to even do it in the room. So I'll send my love to her. But you just got me today, but we're excited to be talking with Chelsey. I'm in Eagle Mountain, Utah. So if you guys know where, if you know where Utah Lake is in Utah, we're just west of Utah Lake, kind of in the new development. The Eagle Mountain area has been developing pretty significantly, so it's a really nice area. The Laybournes and the Henrys live in Utah. They're more up north by the Salt Lake, for those that are familiar with Utah. Where are you guys from? See Meredith in here. We had a couple of people that I'm connected with in Europe, South Georgia, Florida. Oh, wow, you're way out east. Gracie's Connecticut. Wow, you guys are way out east. That's awesome. Appreciate your guys' patience while we take a little bit of time to get started. Again, she's got to go live for me to be able to pull her in, so we're just waiting on her for just a little bit. There were some conditions that she has that I actually had to look up and read up a little bit on, so it's going to be pretty interesting learning about some of these conditions. It's never ceases to amaze me with all the individuals that we're interviewing, you've got the chronic pain community, but then even within that community, you've got all sorts of conditions that are bringing in different pain and suffering. And so it's the first time we have had an opportunity to speak with someone that has what's called interstitial cystitis, and then also POTS. And POTS stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So we're going to be getting into some of the details of these new conditions. Let's see. Oh, you like those decorations? That's Nell's. That's Nell's doing. She's quite the artist. This is kind of a different room. And then she's napping right now. I think she's completely out. I came home from work. And she's probably not going to be able to even join on our secondary account to do commenting. So she'll like to watch the recording when we're done. Chelsey, I see that you joined. What you'll want to do, Chelsey, is you need to go live on your end. So actually go live, and then I invite you. I send an invite, and then we do a dual live. So in order to do that and to get you on camera, you need to hop out of the live and start your own live if you're hearing me there. And then that's how I'll get you going with that. Gracie said, so when she stands up, her heart rate must go through the roof. Yeah, I was reading about something like that, to where that's part of what some of the symptoms are. And she'll have an opportunity to kind of talk about that. And Chelsey, I don't know if you're still in here, but yeah, you want to hop off and just go. Yeah, no worries. That's great. It's absolutely fine. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to just hop off this live with the comment, and you'll just go live yourself, right? So just take a minute to get that ready. And then when you're live, I send an invite to you, and then you'll kind of accept that, and then that will put us on as a dual live. Okay, so that's the way that pulls up. So go ahead and hop out of this so that you can start your TikTok live. And then once that's going, I can see that you are live, and then you'll see that invite. Okay? So again, thanks everybody for your patience while we get this started. It'll be just a few more minutes. You've had a bad week too, Gracie. I am so sorry. Yeah, and you don't need to stay long at all, especially with these getting recorded. I know that I've seen you guys take a look at the posts that we've got, and our views are going a lot higher over on the YouTube site. And it's pretty common, people can't stay the whole time, so and sometimes they can't even watch the whole interview. I tried to do that 60-second kind of highlight to kind of capture kind of the main spirit of what the people that we're interviewing wanted to share. So sometimes that helps, of course, right? And now that we've got the ability to do the 3 minutes, I might even do that if I need to. Okay, we're gonna pull her in here. Hey, how are
Sorry.
you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Let me make sure my volume is completely up here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Well,
How are
I
you?
good. I'm so excited to meet with you.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
glad to finally be able to do this.
yes, Nell, I'll have to excuse Nell. She wanted so bad to be here, but she's just not able to even join with the comments. She's just had one of those days,
Uh,
and
I totally understand that. I hear
yeah,
she's having one of those days, but
yeah.
send her my wishes as well. I
I
hope she
will.
feels better.
I will, and she'll be sure to go out and watch the recording, to give you guys just a little bit of a history of how we even know Chelsey. Um, a little while back, we kind of collaborated with a number of people, and was a part of turning TikTok purple. And we, was able to collect a lot of different various videos that we kind of put together that you can see on YouTube. And part of that was we had a handful of people that was able to join a Zoom, right? We had a Zoom call. In fact, our friend Santa, right, Jay Claus, joined us and was able to share a little bit there. And she was on that call, so we had an opportunity to really kind of talk to her and get to know her a little bit more. Shortly after that, we started the weekly lives, and she was actually one of the very first that we were going to have, and we wasn't able to because of on things on her end, right, where things aren't able to
Yep.
to work out. So she completely understands that. In fact, we have next week something similar happened with the person that we've got for next week. So anyway, she sends her love, and you guys are just stuck with me in this different room here that we've got.
You
um,
are fine. You're great.
And then, as you know, this is gonna be recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so you'll be able to watch the whole video, or you can share it and do whatever you want with it. You can, share that on your social media, and bring your friends and family, and try to just continue to join all those that are coming together, because as you know, it's just way more than just a handful of people. It's as a number of people that are all kind of involved with this and influencing their own communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful for what you guys do too.
oh, well, thanks. Thank you so much. You look great, great. And I was I'll also have you know that I have just been humbled as I have had opportunities to um, learn a little bit more about people's conditions. It's one thing where people are coming together and they're feeling, um, oh, it looks like, yay! Hey, Nell was able to join us, you guys. So
Hi.
that spoonful of sugar underscore is our secondary account, and that allows for us to join. And so she'll be in here for however long
Hi,
she's
Nell.
able to do some commenting. So that's awesome, hon. So don't overdo it, but we were just saying
Right.
how much we miss you. But what I was saying is, uh, it's been humbling to learn about the different conditions that are in just the chronic pain community, right? I mean, it's been a big win for us to just come more together and feeling like that, two words, pain and suffering, is a commonality, right? And you're like, oh, well, not everybody every day seems to be going through that. But then when you start learning about the various conditions that people are going through, there's just so much diversity in what they
Yeah.
go through. And before we get too far into um, kind of having you share a little bit of your story and what you go through, if you would um, mind me, reading a little bit of what I've found to kind of start things off,
Yeah.
and that will get into some of the conditions, and then of course, I don't want to minimize anything that you're going through, so you have an opportunity to expound on it and all of that, right? Um,
Yes.
but interstitial cystitis, you guys, is a chronic condition that causes the bladder uh, to have pressure and pain, sometimes even pelvic pain. And so it can range in kind of the degree of seriousness with that pain. But uh, it's something that um, not just involves pain, but the nervous system, and that it messes up the signals. Uh, uh, you know, somebody that maybe has a healthy part of that their body that, you know, as we know, that fills up, and then you need to go to the bathroom, and then you relieve it, and you're on your way. And so if you've got these mixed signals going on, you feel like you need to, urinate more often or with smaller amounts. And there's no cure. There's some medication and other therapies for that, but and you can expound on that. That's just kind of some of the basics
Yeah.
of that one. Um, and then I'll just at a high level here with this second condition I know that you have had, which has ultimately led to the removal of your bladder, is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So POTS, I think, is becoming more popular, but with acronyms. I have POTS, or you have people say, like people. I have OCD, and maybe they don't know what obsessive compulsive disorder means, but POTS stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and it's a blood circulation disorder. And so if you have any kind of upright, kind of standing upright, you might have some symptoms with your heart rate, not normalizing, or it's a disorder that's actually of the atomic nervous system. So that part of your nervous system that regulates, functions that you don't consciously control, that's where that's at, right? Where it says your heart rate, blood pressure, sweating, body temperature. Those are some of the main things of what's going on there. So she's got all those kinds of things kind of happening. She's had her bladder removed. How am I doing?
Yeah, doing great. You're covering it all.
Anything you wanted to add to that, or you think that gives a pretty good?
Um, I think that gives a pretty. And I'm sorry, my light. I'm using my mirror light, so it's going in and out.
Oh,
So
that's
that's why I
okay.
go dark and bright.
No
But
worries. No worries.
no, I think as far as the descriptions of the conditions, I think that that's pretty accurate.
Okay.
I will say with POTS, a lot of people are often told that it's depression or anxiety, and I think that's why it's just now becoming so popular. You were saying it's becoming more known, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's because of the studies that the dysautonomia centers are funding, and there's more awareness out there. So I think that is why we have more diagnosis, which is great. So, but I think as far as the description of everything, that's pretty accurate.
Okay. I know that you had done a post about chronic pain and the invisible illness, and this is certainly another example when you're dealing just we had um, uh, last week we had Christine, where she had this whole incision right here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not Christine, Jessica, and I had talked to her about how a lot of times when pain's involved, it's more obvious like that. But
Yeah.
you know, someone might look at you and think, okay, well, we're having an interview and I can't see a thing. She's pretending. She's what's
Yes.
the talk to me about what your experience has kind of been with that. And
I think right now in this point in my life, it is a lot worse than it was a few months ago. Because just to kind of give a backstory, so I did have interstitial cystitis, and then ended up having to have my bladder removed after 13 months of daily pain. I was not responsive to treatment, and the only option was to remove my bladder. And then on top of that, I do have the autonomic condition, with POTS. And so I look healthy. I mean, of course, also when I have like my makeup and my hair done, I look more normal. And I'm actually going through the process right now of trying to apply for disability because I've, in the last year, have been hospitalized 7 times for issues from my surgery. And so my work history is not able to be reliable. I'm not able to go to work as much as I should. I can't be a reliable employee. And right now, more than ever, I'm getting that judgment. I try my hardest to not disclose that to anyone that I know that I'm not really close to. Like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm applying for disability. Um, but with my work, you have 6 months to be short term disability. And then at that time, you medically terminate, and then you could come back within 5 years. So I'm thankful to have that opportunity if things happen and I get better. Um, but telling people, like, for example, my boss, like, yeah, well, I'm probably not coming back. And they're like, why? You're so young. You should be able to work. So I'm getting a lot of that right now
Oh
where
my gosh,
people,
I'm so sorry.
and, and I try to often think back before I had any conditions. I wasn't so much like I would never judge anyone who said it, but I think I was living in bliss where I felt normal, I felt fine. So to me, everyone who appeared fine was fine. And it wasn't until I had to think more about what other people are going through that I was able to put myself in the mindset of, okay, they're probably looking at it as if I'm normal because I look normal. So
Mm-hmm.
it has been really hard to deal with the judgment and people judging you and feeling like you have to prove. I think that's the most frustrating thing is feeling like you have to prove yourself. And at that point, like I told my husband all the time, that it seems like the disability Olympics where you have to go through all these hoops and, do all these
Mm-hmm.
different things to prove that you have an illness or to prove that you have chronic pain. So it almost feels like you're competing for something to like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm going to compete. And then people might believe me and then I win. Um, so that is something that I've been dealing with a lot more now. And I think that's something that everyone deals with. Um, but I do think that at the end of the day, I mean, and the first time we met, I told you that I consider myself lucky.
Yeah.
Despite everything I've been through, I feel like I'm lucky because I was able to advocate for myself and I have great insurance and I had the resources to be able to go from doctor to doctor until I had somebody willing to listen to me and help me. So I was able to relieve myself of most of my pain. Um, I still deal with a lot of chronic illness, but now more than ever, I am so active in groups for interstitial cystitis. Even though I no longer technically have that, I do deal
Mm-hmm.
with phantom pain, but I don't have near as much. And it has just given me so much sympathy for people and so much understanding and a need to help people. I never advocate for people and say, oh, you should have your bladder removed because
Yeah.
for most people it's not as serious. Um, but I am more sympathetic. And I think until you go through something like that, you don't have the ability to see it. So I try not to get upset when people are so judgmental. I'm like, okay, they're just in their bliss like I was before. Um, in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, you're lucky that you have the ability to see things like, oh, well, she's just making it up.
Yeah.
Like you are so blessed to be able to think about someone that way because you truly don't understand what they're going through. So it is something that anybody who has any kind of invisible illness or pain, I mean, I sympathize with them. It's so frustrating to feel like you have to prove something and you feel like you spend a majority of your time proving it and it's
Yeah.
frustrating.
I know Nell's gone through a lot of that, and I'm sure those that are listening, can relate with that as well. And I think that it's probably difficult to sometimes tell even whether or not the questions that people have are that questioning, or maybe they're just genuinely, you know, wanting to
Right.
understand. I know that I've even had to talked about this before. I've had to try to, when I'm genuinely just wanting to try to understand, know better, um, be more, slow down and be more mindful of what word choices that you're using, what your tone is, so that the experience that you're giving that person is, this is different than someone just coming across being disbelieving, right?
Exactly.
This is, and I don't know. I
And
mean, it's something that I guess people that aren't used to being around someone like that aren't going to be good at.
right.
Just like anything, we're not born with skills and knowledge and understanding,
Exactly.
And so that's where I
And I
think the awareness and the advocating and the kind of sharing your side of the story and even how that maybe initially made you feel, but it's also an opportunity to have those that are genuinely just wanting to understand better to be like, oh, so that's not the way you want to go about it, that kind of thing.
Yes. And I love that. I love whenever people that I am close with, they take the time to try to understand, even if it's just researching the condition. Like I'll talk to my husband. He sounds a lot like you. He has tried to be so understanding, and a lot of the things that I would try whenever I had interstitial cystitis would be things that he found that others had said, worked. Like we found a doctor in Mississippi who did this treatment. It wasn't covered by insurance, but a lot of people had great success with it. And, even on the doctor's page, it had a whole page just for interstitial cystitis, and it was like a plasma injection.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was considered, you know, uh, non-necessary, not
Yeah,
medically necessary.
non-medically
So it wasn't,
necessary.
yeah. So it wasn't covered. Of course, it didn't work for me, but he found that when we traveled, 4 hours to go have it done twice, and um, having someone who genuinely wants to understand, even if it's just reading about the condition or just trying to understand how you're feeling, that is so wonderful. And I think a lot of people feel like if they ask, sorry,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel like if they ask, they're going to offend people. But I think if you, like you said, choose your words carefully, choose grace and not like accusational, come from a place of genuinely wanting to understand, that can be something that can be so powerful to the person who is dealing with chronic illness, chronic pain, invisible illness, any of that. That can be so just refreshing and almost like relief, like wow, someone actually wants to try to understand.
Yeah.
So I am always thankful when people ask, or just even ask, how are you doing,
Yeah.
really. Like my husband all the time, he'll say, sometimes say, how are you, and I'm like, oh good, and then there'll be times he'll be like, really, how
How
are
are you
you?
doing?
You know,
Yeah.
because I feel like, I always feel like I'm a burden. I always feel like I'm putting a pressure on him, and like I'm burdening his life or making him have to go out of the way to do things for me. So I try to often, especially if it's a day where it's just I'm feeling crummy, nothing serious. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. But when he's like, no, really,
Let's
it's
talk about it.
it's just nice to have
Yeah.
somebody who
It
genuinely wants to understand.
yeah, there, Nell and I we have at nights with our friend, we have kind of that lighthearted, um let me just scoot over here just a second. We have the
Yeah,
lighthearted, watch the TV show kind of thing. But then we also um, need to have serious conversations as well, right? About things sometimes. And this these lives have helped us do that,
yeah,
because maybe it could be the kind of conversation that you have when you go out to dinner with your spouse, but sometimes not, right? You're still around people, or when you're chilling at home, sometimes you don't want to get so heavy about the things of life, right? And you're worried.
exactly.
So it's been
Mm-hmm.
really healthy for us to talk about things, and have that be kind of the safe forum to do that, even for us,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But that's what that reminds me of. And we're talking about insurance, and we're also talking about disability. And that is a world in of itself of inequality. I mean, you talk about you're applying for disability, but if you get approved for that, one of the most minimum requirements is that you have worked long enough to even be
Yep.
considered for it. You know, Nell, she worked her tail off. She worked at Packard Bell for a time. She was, you know, she's had time in her life where she's had that part of kind of the career, place, if you will, where she's worked. But it wasn't long enough to where even though she's, if she's not disabled and who is, um, she's not even eligible for it, right? And so my
Yeah.
heart goes out. I mean, I hope that you can get approved for it, but our system is set up such to where it's not, I'm disabled, I'm not deserving, I don't know if that's the right word, but I have good reason. That's the reason, that's the spirit behind why, if there's any
Yeah.
virtue of what the government has done to benefit from people. But ironically, I can't benefit from that because I didn't work long enough, so that's
Exactly.
discouraging.
And and it's kind of in a place where, I mean, the government should take care of its own people, regardless of how much they worked, because if they
It
haven't
is
worked,
so
a lot of the
true.
times there's reasons why they haven't.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
luckily have met the requirements of years.
Yeah.
However, I've been told, just go ahead and count on being rejected the first time, and
Yeah.
have to appeal it, just because I think it's like 70% of people the first time that apply get denied right off the
Yeah,
bat.
because I mean, a lot of people may not pursue it, but it's interesting
Yeah,
because we were told that same thing, and that still also doesn't apply to us because we could apply 6 times and it doesn't change the fact that she didn't work
yeah,
long enough. So there are some cases where people are suffering out there, and the benefit of what that was intended, and can all of us help to influence that in some way? I mean, I'd like to think that over time, pockets of people that are doing this kind of thing can all, I mean, that's the way that and anything changes is, hey, wait a minute,
yeah,
that's a flaw, and there's a lot of people suffering unnecessarily. Let's go ahead and
yeah,
make that tweak, and whether that is hearing your local, without getting into too much politics, it's maybe someone talking about that and having that ring true
right.
to you, and then getting your representative in place that does the work to change those things. But yeah, I hope that you can get approved for that, Chelsey. That's
Well, thank you, and I hope so too. But in the time, going through all this, my mind has often wandered to on the other side of things, of people who have no choice but to work.
mm,
With disability, you can't make more than a certain amount in order to, before they start taking
pay
away
the
or
disability.
deducting
Yeah.
amounts or approving. Some people get rejected the first step because they
Hmm.
make too much money, but some people don't have short-term disability through their employer, long-term disability, to be able to hold them, have
Yeah.
some sort of income while that decision's being made. So they have no choice but to work. And my heart just breaks for those people as well, because I was that person trying to work, and when I would be hospitalized, most of the time it was for at least 5 days, and then you have to recover. You're not just going to go home from the hospital and go right to work. So it's like right now there's no way that I can be a reliable employee. But a lot
Hmm.
of the time that's not looked at as, okay, well, they were out of work for this long and then they had to recover. It's They just look at your conditions and what their opinion is on how you should be able to function. And like you said, without getting into too much politics, I hope that there is change, but I
Yeah.
also hope that there comes a point where they can look at it where not everyone's the same. We shouldn't put everyone in boxes. I mean, just with interstitial cystitis alone, that's the condition that I'm most familiar with, so I can speak on the most. Um, but you have certain people who just have urgency. Mine was just pain. I didn't have the urgency. I didn't have the need to go often. Mine was just pain. And then you have people, I think, Like there's 3% that actually have the lesions, which I had, and then the other people don't. And some people can drink sodas, some people can't. It's just so different.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with these conditions that cause pain or that have invisible illness, it's not a one size fits
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
whenever you see someone who is able to function that has one thing, that doesn't mean that someone else has it that can't function.
Yeah.
And
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 it's,
that was,
oh, go ahead.
sorry,
No.
that was what was the most disheartening for me personally, because I had never heard of interstitial cystitis before. And I will never forget it. It was December 8th. I was walking to work. I had just started a new position with the same company, but I had a new boss because of my position. Oh, my phone's falling. And it hit me out of nowhere. And it was pain. And I told my boss, I said, I'm so sorry. I know I'm new, but I have to go to the emergency room. I think I have a kidney stone. And it's just so weird how it just flipped a switch. And then after that, it was 18 months of daily pain.
Mm-hmm.
I was totally fine, and then it just hit me, and it never went away. Um, but before they were able to find out that it was interstitial cystitis, uh, one of my coworkers said, "You may have interstitial cystitis. That's what I have." And I was like, "Never heard of that before." But she was able to drink coffee, drink sodas, have ranch. She would be able to eat hot
Very
wings, and
different.
she would have minor flares, here and there. Where I, for 18 months, ate plain cheeseburgers with no ketchup, no mustard, no toppings, French fries, and chicken fingers, and that was all that I ate. And I could only drink water because everything else was too acidic, which would cause pain in my bladder. And um, so I could see the difference between her and me, and
Yeah.
it was, to me, so crazy, the difference. And I'm starting to learn that with most conditions, it's that way, because it just affects everyone differently. And so whenever people apply for any kind of assistance like that, it's on paper. They look at the condition instead of the person themselves. Like, this person may be able to function, but I've had, infections and the blood clot, blood transfusions, all of this.
Yeah.
So mine's a little bit different. So I have, I'm not able to function. Um, so I do
Yeah.
hope that there comes a time where more people are able to access benefits, but also where not even just the disability process, but just people in general are able to not put people in a box based off of what they think they should be like because of that condition, because everyone is different. And
Absolutely. And Nell, it looks like Nell's going to hop off, you guys. Thanks, babe, for joining us. We
thank you for joining. I hope
for
you feel
sure love
better.
you. You'll be able to catch the recording on YouTube. So yeah, it's the same concept of insurance, and the conversation has gone on forever. And you know, it's really the reason there's a certain degree of function and virtue in what insurance and the government are doing, even though it's flawed and there's corruption and all this, right? And so there's a place for charities, right? Whether that's churches involved with people that are in their congregation, or whether that's organizations like the American Chronic Pain Association and the fundraising. And it's part of the reason why we, we're in the process of organizing a collaborative fundraising event um, for Spoonful of Sugar, in addition to bigger organizations, because whether big or small, and there's a lot of different ones out there, um, if people are doing more and more of that, and GoFundMe's has its own place, right? I mean, that has been
Yeah.
that's kind of like that, where people are more empowered to do that, and they're not really a nonprofit,
Yeah.
organization. But nonprofits, one of the reasons why nonprofits can be so successful, especially ones where people that have, an interest, and they've got a sympathy for what the fundraising is for, is because they trust that the people that are involved with that fund get it, and they're trying to
Yeah.
help bridge gaps. Um,
Yeah.
I just saw, if you guys aren't following Andy's journey on TikTok, but she's got like 2.3 million. She did a duet and was asking for Charlie D'Amelio to duet her, and she finally did, and that was part of, I'm sure, uh, of getting some following. But she's got some major health issues. She's got holes in her back with what she's got going on, and she's got this machine that I don't think she owns, that she's trying to get insurance approved for, that allows for her to be upright, and then she does kind of these dances. So go and follow her, check her out. But I've been in contact with her when she's feeling up to it. I think we're going to have her on and not have to put her in line back in March, which is, we're booked out now through February.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah.
That's great.
So follow her and look to that. But I had mentioned that in one of her comments as she was getting ready to see if insurance would approve for it. And that's the kind of thing that I know that Nell and I would love to do, is to, you see stuff like that and you see that the person that's going through that suffering, they're defining for others what would really make that biggest difference. And then they're in this place where they're kind of feeling like they have to go and try to prove, right, to wherever it is that's out there. And wouldn't that just be nice to be able to just be like, you know what? People like you and me that get it, they know that there's a flawed system in this world. Boom, there you go. You got a brand new thing, and that's yours, kind of a thing. And that would just be amazing. I'm not, and
Absolutely.
I wasn't committing to being able to do that, and even if we get the funds, it's not like that there was anything formal. But the point is that that's the kind of thing that we would love to do, and sometimes that's getting someone's PayPal, and through the foundation that you've got, getting it sent, or it might sometimes, as Nell talks about, how she actually wants to do more physically traveling, right, and cutting a check through foundation. So we'll see how things are kind of progressing, because that's certainly something that Nell and I are kind of going down. But I think of that because we want to be careful to not put so much faith and trust just in those current systems. Sometimes
Yeah.
it does us well to find some organizations, even if for right now it was starting out as, you know what, the American Chronic Pain Association, whether that's because you've seen us talking about the collaborative effort on Good Things Utah with us, whether you know that we're in contact with them as to doing more formal fundraising, or even if it's just knowing that, hey, this is how we learned about them. I didn't know there was an organization like that that's been doing this for 40 years. I can't afford anything. Let me just throw 20, let me go on their site, and boom, $20. And $20 adds up, and then before you know it, you've got things really built up for an organization that's going to do, that you trust is going to do some good things. So it has its own place, and nobody's pretending to have all the solutions. I mean, even with the most pure uh, nonprofit organizations kind of supplementing, and good leaders getting put in office to kind of try to change things. Sometimes the reality is that things just still aren't going to be fair, and someone's just not going
Yes.
to get something in. And that's where maybe things like what we're doing here, even though it's not, monetary, you might not be able to just throwing money to people also isn't the solution either, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Something that I strongly encourage for anyone who's going through any kind of chronic pain or chronic illness, or even people who are like me, who are lucky enough to no longer have as much of the chronic pain, is to join groups on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
for the condition that you have. I've found so much peace and so much just happiness being able to be in those groups. because a lot of times people who are joining, they are starting at the bottom level of their condition, trying to figure out this condition, and you have years of resources and information. And how wonderful is that to have someone hey, here's all the information that I have. I wish I would have had that in the beginning. um, I know, I think back to a few weeks ago, I was scrolling through Facebook, wasn't even in one of the groups, but it just showed up on my news feed. And a mom who has been posting very actively in the groups, her daughter has been told that her only option is removing bladder. And that's always the last case scenario. No doctor is going to want to touch a healthy bladder. And so many people have to try to advocate to get it removed, but this woman actually had a daughter who had been told it needed to be removed, and insurance wouldn't cover it. And so in her post, she said, I'm looking for doctors in Mexico to help me remove my daughter's bladder. It's cheaper in Mexico, and I will find someone willing there. It'd be better for me to go there than it would try to convince another doctor who would be able to do it cheaper. And I messaged that woman, and I was like, please do not go. I mean, if that's your last resort, do what you have to do.
But
But I told her, I
risks.
was like, please, yeah. I just didn't want to come off judgmental if anyone
No,
had done
no,
that.
there's
But
way higher risks in going outside
yes,
of the
yes.
United
And
States
so
oftentimes,
I messaged her, and I said, please don't do that. And I gave her my doctor's information because I knew that my doctor has been good to help financially set up like payment plans or anything for people. And he's not really well known in the interstitial cystitis community because he is in Alabama. It's not where a lot of people typically look. But I just knew based off of my experience that he seems like the type that was understanding and sympathetic towards the condition.
Mm-hmm.
And so she reached out, and he's like, okay, we can do it on the phone consultation. And they did. And she sent all the records, and he ended up helping her out. And she's
Oh,
able to make
good.
payments on that.
Oh, good.
And so she's actually having her surgery tomorrow instead of going to Mexico.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so that
that's
just made me
amazing.
so
Oh, yeah.
happy.
So you was able to influence the outcome.
Yes.
See, that's the thing
Yes.
that we're talking about is that there's so many good people out there in all sorts of forums, and I mean there just is, and
Yeah.
and we're just in the grand scheme of things just a really small part of that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a perfect example where you don't have to be formalized in a foundation. You don't have to be on a television show or this or whatever. Every person that wants to make a difference in helping the pain and suffering that's in this world can absolutely do it, just like you did
Yeah.
with that person.
And and if you guys with your foundation, whatever you are trying to do, if you guys ever need any help, I would love to help because, like I said, that's just given me so much happiness. I do think that for some people, it's easy to become obsessed with your condition. At one point I was reading about it all the time when I was still going through it, and I just became so consumed with it. So if you are doing those Facebook groups and you are
Mm,
trying, to help, take a break. Don't let it consume
yeah,
you.
that's a good point
Try
too.
to have your own life as well, because you are worth more and you are more than your condition. So just a disclaimer, if you do that, getting on Facebook groups, just don't let it consume you to the point that that's all you're doing,
Yeah, be
because
balanced, right? I mean, there's a number of
yeah,
different reasons why anybody's reaching out to social media, and usually it's a connection of some kind or a support of some kind. And so the same thing applies, you know, uh, to anything. I think, right? It's just
yep,
within reason. Don't overdo it, and just be
exactly.
completely isolated if you can help it, right? I mean, even Nell with a lot of the isolation she has, she's got people that's surrounding her often, and we're doing things there, around her in the room, and so there's always some things that you can do that are just small like that still go
Yeah.
a long way. Yeah.
Exactly. And I know too, something I wish a lot of actual employers would do, because I just think this is amazing, is my employer slash former employer at this moment,
Mm-hmm.
while we wait to figure out what's going to
Yeah.
happen, they have a benevolence fund. And so every paycheck, every 2 weeks, I have $2 taken out of my check. $2. You don't really miss $2.
Yeah.
And you do that every month. As soon as you hire on, you have a paper you sign if you want to do it or not. Most people do it. And that benevolence fund is for people who need assistance, not just medical, but they've helped people with fires, people who've had had to go travel for a funeral,
Yeah. Hardship.
just whatever. And you submitted a request, and whenever I submitted I wasn't even going to do it, but one of the people I worked with at my location was on this board of delegating the funds, and he's like, "You need to submit." And I was like, "Okay." So I had submitted whenever I had my bladder removed, and I think it ended up being like $3,000 that I got
Wow.
from that benevolence fund.
Oh, that's awesome.
We have a lot of employees, and $2 every paycheck adds up.
Yeah.
But that was such a
That's
blessing.
a big, yeah.
And yeah. And then whenever I, the first time I had been hospitalized after my surgery because of C. diff, I had to ride ambulance for 2 hours away. And my husband, of course, had to take off work to be there with me. And he works at the same employer. And so because he was missing work, he was able to, he didn't get as much, but he got some payment, which we were thankful for anything, for his travel, and then to help compensate some of the time that he had off.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And the company sets it up, but it's the employees who pay in. And, they meet every month, and then they have emergency meetings for cases like mine that came up, suddenly. And they just delegate to people who need it. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, especially those that have a lot of employees, if you can implement something like that, because that was so life changing for me. And I know it's blessed so many other people as well. And I just
Yeah.
think things like that can be changed, and just kind of put back a little bit more heart into work, and just uniting the employees. So if there
Yeah, for sure.
ever anyone out there that's listening to this, if you run a
Yeah.
business, think about that, because
Yeah,
that was an
absolutely.
amazing thing that was done. And I was so thankful for that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just asking the questions. I remember I was, and this is a little bit off topic, but it reminds me of what can sometimes happen if you just don't know what even question to ask, or that help's available. Um, there was a point in my life where I thought I'd never be able to go to higher education because I can't afford it and things like that. And I had a friend that talked to me about, hey, have you looked into financial aid and a Pell Grant and things like that? You've got kids and da da da. And I looked into it, and I was able to get a Pell Grant that actually financed all the way up through my associate's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and had I not just talked with someone that you trust and
Right.
ask around, uh,
Yep.
you very easily could be coming to conclusions that are very real to you, and you really think that maybe that's the only truthful conclusion
Yeah.
that it can be come to, but maybe not so much, right? Maybe it's a discovering of the American Chronic Pain Association, and what the process is of reaching out to them if there's something that you haven't needed. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Maybe it's like with what you experienced. There are good people
Yeah.
out there that are all trying to help, for sure. So
And I think too, kind of going along with what you were saying about, asking questions and asking around to try to figure out what you could do for school. I think that same thing applies to health as well. Now, I know before I start, I know that not everyone is as blessed and not able to be able to go from doctor to doctor.
mm-hmm.
But
And
I
do their
have,
research. That could be exhausting in and of itself, right? Yeah, trying to.
yes. And I'm very blessed with great insurance that with most doctors, unless it's their personal policy to require referrals, my insurance doesn't require that. So I was my biggest advocate. And I think that's something that so many people, if you can, be your own advocate. Research, talk to doctors. If a doctor's not listening to you, try to find someone else. I went to 5 urologists before I finally got an answer. There's a such thing as the Interstitial Cystitis Awareness program, and all that they do is they have doctors who have signed up and said, "Yeah, I'll be a certified, not really certified, certified interstitial cystitis doctor." And they go through all these conferences to become knowledgeable and in order to earn that badge through the ICA organization. And so they have maps of doctors who are, certified, and there was like the top doctor for, every year they have their doctor of the year. And for like 4 years, this one doctor had been the doctor of the year. And I was like, oh, well, he's got to be wonderful, and he has done so many wonderful things for other people and have helped them live a normal life. But unfortunately for me, I just had such a different case that, he said, this, there's nothing, if we remove your bladder, it's not going to help, but you're not really responding for treatment. So it was kind of like, well, you're just, stuck. And sorry, my cat is
That's okay.
crazy.
Those kittens, is it those kittens that you
Yeah.
found? I was watching
Yes.
that. Yeah, in your house, right?
Yeah. So many cats, and so they've just added to it. But so I went to the best doctor who'd been voted, and like I said, he'd done so many wonderful things for other people. But once again, we're all unique, we're all different, and so with me, he hadn't really seen a case like mine, so he wasn't sure. And so I kept going, and finally I had a doctor that was able to explain everything I'd gone through, why I was going through that, and why I wasn't responding to treatment. And so the point of all that is just, to your extent that you were able to be your own advocate, ask questions, do research. Had I not, done research, I wouldn't have been able to find other doctors to go to. None of my doctors locally would even have mentioned or referred me to those other doctors because they're not within their network. They don't know them. They're 2, 3, 4. The one I went to that was the best was 6 hours away. So those, your local doctors a lot of times aren't going to recommend other doctors that may help you. So find organizations that support your condition. See if they have certified doctors. If you can, go to those doctors and just do whatever you can, because for some people, it's just chronic pain is their life, and there's no cure for what they have. And unfortunately, at some point, you do come to an end where there's no more answers. However, exhaust every option that you can, because you just never know if there could be one thing that could even make your life a tiny little bit better. I'm sure anyone that has chronic pain would agree. If there's something you could do to give you 2 hours a day more without chronic pain or as bad pain, they would take that opportunity. So just always be your own advocate.
Nobody's going to help yourself like you can help yourself. It doesn't matter how many caring people or professionals that you have, and everyone can help themselves regardless of what that help is. And sometimes it might be, all I'm going to do for myself right now is just have some alone time in this quiet room, and I'm just going to be thinking through, what changes can I make inside of me, whether that's my thoughts or what I'm focusing on. They're always, that's one of the things that I've found pretty sobering, and it's kind of a difficult conclusion to come to, because it means, and if you're anything like me, it's hard to acknowledge this, but you always should be taking responsibility. Jack Canfield wrote a book I wrote, The Success Principles, and he has this principle, live your life as if you're 100% responsible. Now, of course, you're not going to be responsible for every little thing, but try to live your life as if, because I think we all have a tendency to not want to take responsibility for something, right? Somebody else
Right.
can, and if you think of that, regardless of all the problems in society or what's lacking or all these things that we're talking about, sometimes what can just make the difference is just having a moment of silence with your higher power, whomever that is for you, and try to just identify, what can I do that would make the difference. One of the things that was that I've done, and I'll share this with you because this might be helpful, and then I want to kind of back up a little bit and kind of see if you can take us back and kind of share your story about how some of your conditions came about and what you went through, if
Yeah.
that's okay. But one of the things that you don't want to take this literal, but it's worked for me, and that is every day we all go through life, and everybody, even the most healthiest people, have wants. I want this, I want that, I want this for myself, I want that for my children, I want this for myself with this, this kind of thing. And we're basically pursuing those needs and wants. That's normal, that's healthy. And
Yeah.
when people have problem with something in their life, whether that's that they, whether they define that as unhappy with something, or whether that means that they're complaining, or whether that means that they're struggling, it's usually because that healthy, part of you that wants to just basically have everything that's good and healthy has something that isn't in their life,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you think about that. And I tried something, and I was pretty surprised. And don't take it literal, but I just kind of had this thought of like, let go, and that's also a principle, the whole letting go, that's not new, but I tried this thought of let go of everything you've ever wanted. I mean, think of that for a moment. Now, of course, you can't, live like that. You have to wake up the next morning, and someone's got to pay the bills and all this kind of stuff, right? And
Yeah.
but I I practiced that. Just let go with everything that you ever wanted. Not just let go of, fill in the blank. I mean, that's powerful enough if you try that, right? Choose something that
Yeah.
you really wanted for yourself, even if it's a good desire, whatever. And maybe you're causing a lot of your grief because you're having a difficult time letting go of something. Maybe that's, your relationship with a sibling isn't quite what you'd like for it to be, and it's because they're not reciprocating, and you're getting bent out of shape with that because really it's something you wanted, but you're not letting go of it, kind of a thing, right? And
Right.
so I took that to the extent where it wasn't just let go of this or let go of that, but as I was just getting ready for bed and things, it was just let go of everything you've ever wanted. And wow, I'll tell you, it was one of the most peaceful moments. I started
Yeah.
realizing that a lot of grief and kind of heaviness and hardship, you don't realize consciously that you can bring a lot of that on yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can
That's
kind
so
of
true.
be, I don't know if you want to call it, your own victim, and it kind of ties into, you can be your own worst enemy or get out of your way, all these kinds of things. But anyway, if that rings true to you, and again, don't take it literal in that you don't have to give up forever everything that you've ever wanted, because that's would be unreasonable. But to gain the benefit of just in that moment, letting go to that level was very powerful for me. And I don't think I've ever done that before without having my reaction be, hell no, I'm not going to give up
Right.
everything.
Right.
Does that ring true
That
for
is
you
that.
at all? I mean, that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is very powerful, and just to add to it quickly, I think
Yeah,
too it goes along with at some point you kind of have to have acceptance of whatever you're going through,
yeah, and that's an
and you have
easier way
to
to say it.
set
Yeah,
expectations. Yeah, and you
yeah,
have to set expectations for yourself. So like even like going back to like any kind of condition, you have to kind of just have acceptance, but also expectations of what you define as a good day, what you define as a bad day. So that way you're able to track things more. So you're not just always hoping for a good day or hoping for it to
there
go
you
away. You
go.
just kind of have to have the expectations that some things unfortunately just aren't going to go away, but you have to try to find out how can you move past that, so
Yeah.
I think, like you said, just let go of the expectations that it's all going to go away if realistically it's just not.
Yeah.
So I do.
And then and if you haven't read the book Man's Search for Happiness or Meaning, Happiness, for Viktor Frankl's story, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mm-mm.
But he is the master of teaching that in that story more than anyone I've ever heard, where he was in this, concentration camp and he's just isolated. And he shares how it doesn't matter what was stripped from him, what people, what they were, they nobody could ever reach into the most inner, workings of the mind and the soul. Um, and that he always had that empowerment of that choice in that moment to make a decision about how he was responding to things or whatever, and it helped him survive. I don't know if it was Auschwitz or whatever. Man's Search for Meaning, I think it is by Viktor Frankl. Could be Happiness, like
I'll
could
have
be.
to check that out.
Yeah,
I've
but
started to try to read more books,
yeah,
along the lines. It sounds like a good one.
but yeah, and I love that we talk before we kind of transition into some of the things that you're going to share, more personally, what your story is, in that we always have that responsibility and empowerment, because especially in the chronic pain community, and I can't imagine, and I can't speak for anywhere close to people and the pain that they go through, but I'm sure that you feel that, like, that sometimes, not that I'm saying that people are saying they're a victim or that they act like the victim, but if you're in pain, any of us are feeling like we're a victim of something, right? You're in that kind of that moment.
Absolutely.
So sometimes I'm sure it's probably even easier to fall into not feeling like that you're empowered with something.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
a very personal thing for everybody on what you think that might be. I've shared, just some things that would really made a difference that I'm going to continue to practice and kind of see if that can help me to be healthier with some of the things that I just go through.
And I
But,
love that.
but yeah, hopefully that can be encouraging, and that, what, we always got something that we can do to help ourselves, even if we feel we're getting turned down by the world.
Absolutely. There is something that we can always do. Even if it's just to do something that brings you a smile, just whatever you have to do that day to make it that much better.
Spoonful of sugar.
So.
That's why Nell calls it that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, well,
Um,
good. Thank you
so
for
I guess,
sharing that insight. Yeah, take us
yeah.
back a little bit, Chelsey. We talked about your conditions, kind of the textbook version of it, and you kind of talked a little bit about that. But what's your personal story kind of been about how that came about, and what was that like starting to learn about it, and what you went through? And I mean, take us there.
Well, okay. So it kind of goes back, and this is just the first part is totally my own theory. So I'll just say that.
Okay.
I've never had a doctor say, yes, this is exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so in 2008, I had my appendix removed. And in 2014, I had a lot of similar pain, in my stomach and right side. And I kept going from doctor to doctor, and everyone was like, nothing's wrong. You just have a UTI. It's not, when they tested, it would never show a UTI, but
Yeah.
they were like, oh, it's just a UTI. So finally, after a year of going from place to place, I had a doctor refer me to a urologist. And urologist did an X-ray, and they immediately called me into their office, not even a room, but to his actual desk. And I'm like, that's weird.
That's kind of
And
what's
he's
up with
like,
that, right?
yeah. I'm like, okay, something's going on. I'm like, oh gosh, what is it? Like in my head, I'm like, it's something really bad.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I know what's wrong with you. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, you have appendicitis. And I said, no, I had my appendix removed back in 2008. And I'm like, okay, this doctor's crazy. And he said, they didn't remove all of it. And so he pulled
What?
out the x ray and he showed me. And sure enough, there was a little tiny stump, and so it's called stump appendicitis.
Are you
And
kidding?
the kind that I had was 36 known cases in the U.S. ever. And so I ended up having to go through all kinds of tests because they weren't really sure how it was attached, and when they removed it, if it would like release the infection into my bloodstream or
Well, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And so they finally were able to determine the best way to remove it, and they removed it. And following that, I would have some random pelvic pain, and I just kind of ignored it because I was like, okay, I had a really bad history with all of that with doctors. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to ignore it, and it's just going to go away. And then, and like I said, that's my theory. I've never had a doctor say, well, this is why, but I've done a lot of research of my own, and a lot of people end up getting interstitial cystitis after appendicitis because of the infection and inflammation. And if people let it go for a long period of time, there have been studies that show they may be correlated. So that's in my mind. That's how I think the interstitial cystitis started. But anyways, going back, I had my
Because it could have been.
appendix removed.
It could have been related.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So for the second time, I had my appendix removed. And just a side note, when you go to the doctor and you have to fill out all of your surgeries, every time I already know as soon as they were reading that paper, I'm like, yep, here comes the question. It's always, did you wrote on here 2 appendectomies? I'm like, yep.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people are like, there's not even a place for me to put that in my system. Like once you put appendectomy, it doesn't let me
×2.
put it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always get the funniest reactions from it, and my husband, when he goes with me, he always
Nobody
laughs at it
has
too because he
2. What's
knows that
wrong
it's
with
coming.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had that done, and then about probably 4 or 5 months later, I had started really working out, and I lost like 40 pounds, and I felt great, was in the best shape of my life. And I started to notice whenever I would work out, my heart rate would get really higher than like my husband's would, and he'd be doing the same workout as me. And so I kind of noticed that and kept a watch on it. And then I passed out one day, and so I'm like, okay. So I went and I got checked out, and first I was told, well, it's just depression. You're just having anxiety and depression, and you were just having an anxiety attack. And so the longer it went on, my heart rate progressively started getting worse, and I would still pass out at times. And so I finally went and saw a cardiologist, and they did a tilt table test, they did a echocardiogram, they did a stress test, and they diagnosed me with the POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And so even to this day, that's just something that's not going to go away. So I deal with my heart rate getting up to 140, 150 just from standing up, my blood pressure bottoming out, pass out, all of that. So I dealt with that for I think 2 years. And then, like I had said, December a few years ago, I was going into work, and I had pain hit me, and I thought I had a kidney stone. And I was very lucky because I was quickly diagnosed with interstitial cystitis, where a lot of people are not. So I knew pretty early on what it was. And most people have flares, where mine was just every day was a flare. And
Oh my
I was
goodness.
in terrible pain, and I am ashamed and to this day, I have a hard time thinking about thoughts that I had then.
Yeah. Oh,
I had,
no judgment.
I had,
I'm sure
yeah,
my swear words would have been in my head. I wouldn't have been the happiest camper.
yeah. So it started with just pain every day, and the only thing that would ever make it feel better, and to this day, I'll probably never be able to eat celery again. I would drink celery juice and put baking soda in it, and I would drink it. And that would be the only thing that would help. And it was the
It would
most
help.
disgusting thing ever.
It would help.
Yeah, it would help the inflammation. The I think more so than anything, it was the actual bacon powder, because that lowers the acidity in the bladder. And with mine, I had ulcers lining my bladder, so like the lining of my bladder was exposed, and
Oh my
urine
gosh.
itself is toxic. Not toxic, but
That's
has a high
it's
acidity.
acidity.
Yes,
Yeah.
not So it had high acidity. So anytime I would eat something or drink something, especially that was high in acidity, it would just irritate it because it was just basically raw nerves
Yeah.
on the lining of my bladder. And from what my doctors had told me, essentially my bladder got messages that it was allergic to my own urine, and so that is why the ulcers would form.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that those ulcers would heal, just like with a scar or anything like that, when you cut yourself, your skin kind of pinches together to heal and to
Scar
create a
tissue.
scar.
Yeah.
And so the lining where the ulcers were, it would do that as well. And so that would make the bladder smaller and smaller. And then would
Ooh.
also lead to, whenever it was trying to heal, that pinching of the skin around it would cause more intense pain. And so I had 18 months of just ulcers every time they would do like a cystectomy, where they go in and they fill your bladder as full as it possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
and then they let it hold. Of course, you're asleep, thankfully, but they let it hold for like 2 or 3 minutes, and they go in and they look at the camera, and that's how they can see the actual lining, which is so awful because that procedure is the only way to diagnose people with interstitial cystitis. And it's very invasive. It makes your pain worse for most people. So that alone is just very,
Yeah.
I hope that there will be a time where there's something else other than that. But anyways,
Yeah.
so I constantly had those linings for 18 months. And I was just desperate. I had, doctors tell me, you need to try this. This works for, other people. And I would get on the Facebook groups and I would see people say, oh, I'm so thankful I haven't had a flare in 16 months, or I haven't had a flare in a month. And I was like, but I'm always in a flare. And then that was when I learned that only like 3% of people with IC have those ulcers. So I think that helped doing research and seeing why
Yeah.
I was having so much more problems than other people. It gave me a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, because it wasn't as common.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so I would pretty much stay in bed. I would go to work on the days that I could. Uh, I would stay in bed. I had no life. I really didn't. I would go to work and I would come home and I would lay in bed and I'd go to sleep and I'd get up and I'd do the same thing again. If my husband ever wanted to see me or spend time with me, he would come sit in bed with me and we'd watch a movie. Uh, and before I went to sleep, I mean, that was really the only thing that I did. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I was blessed to be able to find a pain management doctor that helped. But I'll never forget that I had someone tell me, oh, you're going to pain management, which I actually asked if I could get a referral for that. That
Yeah.
was, my choice. But I was told, oh, you're going to pain management. They only do that to people who are addicted to opioids. And I'm like, in my mind, I'd never dealt with pain management. I
Yeah.
knew that
Like,
it was there and it existed, but I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to go in there and they're going to think all these bad things about me and that I'm just a lowlife. And I
yeah.
remember feeling so discouraged and so just down about myself my first appointment. And then when I left, I was like, wow, he really wanted to help me. I think that pain management doctor was like the first one along the way that actually asked questions and
Yeah.
tried to understand. And he actually listened to me. And I was like, okay, maybe he doesn't see me in such a negative way. And
Yeah.
had it not had been for pain management, I wouldn't have made it. Um, there were times where like I'll never forget, I ended up having to just go on pain patches because just pills weren't lasting as long.
Yeah.
Pain patches were
Lidocaine
better
or
for
whatever.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time when I was applying a pain patch, I put it on wrong and then it wasn't able to be like adhere to my skin. So I had to throw it away. And you're supposed to have one a week for a month. You get 4 in a prescription. And so I was like, the last week of the month, I didn't have one.
Yeah.
I could have called and explained, but in my mind, I was like, nope, because I don't want to seem like a junkie trying to
Yeah,
call and,
exactly.
get it. And that was the worst week of my life in pain. And so I was very fortunate to have pain management. I could not have done it without it. But even then, I still was in bed every day.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't make me feel like I could go run a marathon, but it made me feel like I could at least not just curl up in a ball and cry.
Yeah.
And so I dealt with the pain. And like I told you, I literally only ate plain cheeseburgers, and it couldn't be from like fast food. It had to be at home cooked cheeseburgers, chicken fingers, French fries, and water. And that was all that I ate, all that I drank. I couldn't have any ranch because it has vinegar in it. Couldn't have ketchup, mustard, like nothing. Everything was just plain and bland. And that was all that I could eat. And then I finally found a doctor from where I live, about 2 hours where I live, and I went. And I was so desperate. Once again, it kind of goes back to like being an advocate, because I went to him. It was my first meeting with him, first appointment. And I had listed every single treatment I had tried, natural and, done by doctors or done at home, recommended by doctors. And I had written down every single penny that I had spent with great insurance. Within that 18-month period, I had spent over $6,000 just, traveling, hotels, the treatments that weren't covered by insurance. And I went to him and I was like, okay, I'm bringing you this so I can show you that I've been to all these doctors and pretty much everything that you're more than likely going to recommend, which I'll listen to you, whatever you recommend, but I've probably already tried it. So I came really prepared. And I had been in there for like 2 minutes before he looked at it, and he had already had all of my records that I'd sent to him before it. He said, yeah, I think that we need to remove your bladder. And to kind of go back, I remember...
The pain management person is the one that...
No, this was a urologist.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was good.
I remember probably about 6 months in, I ended up having to go to the emergency room one time because I was in such bad pain. I could not get it to stop. My heart, because of my POTS, my heart rate, I couldn't get it to go down.
Because what it trigger is if what you're going through with your bladder area, would that trigger you to be moving up and down more, or doing something that would actually kind of trigger that condition too?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And especially like the days that I was in a lot of pain, it would really make my symptoms with the POTS a lot worse. Mm-hmm. And it had gotten to the point where, like, all before my bladder problems, the 2 years that I had POTS and just that, I was able to do most things by myself. And then once I got interstitial cystitis, I was no longer able to shower by myself because I would pass out. Well, I say shower by myself. My husband has to be in the next room, so if he hears a loud thud, he knows to come check on me. So I can't shower at home by myself anymore, and I couldn't do a lot more of the chores around the house because of my heart rate was acting up and my blood pressure was bottoming out a lot more. I think more so from like stress, which also just naturally makes your heart rate higher.
It's interesting that you're. Let me just. By the way, hopkinsmedicine.org is the source of where I'm getting some of this information, and mayoclinic.org.
Yes.
But this says, in most patients with POTS, the structure of the heart itself is normal, but POTS symptoms arise from a combination of the following. So lower amount of blood in the circulation, excessive pooling of blood below the level of the heart when upright,
Mm-hmm.
and then elevated levels of certain hormones, such as epinephrine or adrenaline, since it's released by adrenal glands. And so when you stand, the gravity pulls more blood into the lower half of the body in a healthy person. Yes. To ensure that a sufficient amount of blood reaches the brain. The body activates several nervous system responses. One such response is releasing hormones that help tighten blood vessels and cause a modest increase in heart rate. And then that leads to a better blood flow to the heart and brain, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. People with POTS, for unclear reasons, that may differ from person to person. The blood vessels don't respond efficiently to the signal.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I wear compression socks to try to prevent as much blood pooling to my legs. And then I actually have to have 5,000 milligrams of sodium a day. I take salt supplements because salt will help increase your blood volume. And so the more blood volume that you have, the less likely it is to pool down to your legs.
Could it make you pass
And
out?
yes. And that was why I was no longer able to shower without my husband being home, because my condition had gotten so bad whenever I had started getting the IC that I would more than likely pass out in the shower from the heat and from standing up for too long, or the heat always just makes it worse. And I don't pass out near as much now, which is great. But whenever I had IC, everything was just so out of whack that. But honestly, I never really thought about it that much. I would feel my heart racing. I'm like, okay, I have to sit down. But I never really thought about my POTS as much, just because I was dealing with pain, and to me that was, at that time was way more pressing. So a lot of the time I failed to do all the preventative measures as well, like taking enough sodium, wearing compression socks, because it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. So I had to really remind myself that I have more than just IC, and that contributed to it a lot as well, because I wasn't as on top of things because I just had so much going on. So
Overwhelmed, yeah. I mean, you've got
yeah,
multiple kinds of things going on. I mean, it's like, boy,
yeah,
I you know, part of me, bless her heart, there's if Nell's not even able to join, it's for a good reason. But it's these kinds of conversations that she just, she's like, oh my gosh, that I can relate with, and
yeah,
so even though there's a lot of diversity in what we're hearing, she can relate so much. I mean, she's in bed a lot, and she's got multiple conditions that trigger each other, and moments of
yeah.
where I'm sure you feel just overwhelmed, right? And get
Yes,
hard on
exactly.
yourself. Have you experienced that where you actually get hard on yourself, like too hard on yourself?
I I do. And that, once again, it kind of goes back to, I feel very blessed because I don't deal with the chronic pain as much anymore. But just kind of fast forward. So, I filmed the doctor who removed my bladder and removed it. And then immediately following that, since last June, I've had C. diff, I've had sepsis twice. I've been sent home from the hospital twice with PICC lines. I had to have a blood transfusion. I've had a blood clot. Um, and then I've had reoccurring infections. And the doctors have said that there's nothing physically that they can see that's causing the infections. So everything's routed properly. All the
Right.
plumbing is good,
Yeah.
essentially. Some people are just prone to having, like, for people who have their bladder removed, on average, it's about 2 to 3 infections a year, is what my doctor said is what can be expected. But some people just, unfortunately, once they have it, they just get more infections than usual. And once again, shining star, like I said, goes back to the disability Olympics, because it's
Yeah.
always like, I feel like it's always got to be like the craziest thing. And so I'm just one of those that have more infections. And on top of that, most people just have an infection that they can take antibiotics and they're fine. With me, I've had 4 infections, 2 of which turned septic, and then other 2 that have put me in the hospital. So I've been hospitalized 4 times since then because of infections. And I'm actually dealing with an infection right now. That's why I was a little bit late, because I had been to the doctor. They're doing a new culture to make sure that I'm on the right antibiotic. But it's a little bit tricky for me because I had C. diff, so I can't take certain antibiotics. I can't be on too long because I could get C. diff again. More like, I'm more prone to getting it.
What's C.
But
diff?
to go to your C. diff, to be honest with you, I don't even know
Is it
exactly
is it like
what
a
it is. It's I just know that it's caused from hospitalizations or antibiotics, and it's cured by hospitalization and antibiotics. So,
Okay.
but it's essentially, from what I can tell, it's something that with your digestive tract. I think it's
Okay.
like a type of bacteria that gets in your digestive tract,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
so
I know. I
you
know.
have,
I think Nell's
yeah,
talked about that before. Yeah.
yes. So to go back to your question about being hard on myself, I was more hard on myself after I had my surgery and after I had my bladder removed, because I felt like I should be so thankful that I'm not in pain as bad as I was. I should be
Mm-hmm.
so thankful. But I still am dealing with other stuff. I'm dealing with infections. And to me, I've kind of accepted, because I've been seeing so many different doctors and infectious disease doctors, and no one can find a reason why the infections are happening, so they're just going to keep happening. So I've kind of had to accept that. I've been more hard on myself because I feel like I should be more appreciative
Mm-hmm.
that I am not in the pain anymore. And when I tell people my story of everything I've been through and how many times I've been hospitalized, the first thing I always hear is, "Oh my gosh, bless your heart, you've been through so much." And their response whenever I tell them if I could do it all over again, I would do it tomorrow. I would go through every single day of it again. Um, so I am coming to more grips of being thankful. In my mind, it would have been a perfect world if I just had my bladder removed and that was it, no more problems. I sometimes get really down that I essentially traded one problem for another. Granted, I'll take the problem I'm having over what I was having. But I was really hard on myself for a while because I didn't feel appreciative of the situation that I was in. Um, and even now, I know I have this conversation with my husband at least once every 2 months. I've gotten to the point where sometimes I even question myself. Like I asked him the other day, I said, "Do you, like, every day, do you feel normal? Like, do you feel when you get up in the morning, do you feel good? Do you feel like going to work?"
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Well, yeah, I feel," he's like, "I mean, no one wants to go to work, but I
Yeah.
feel up to it." And like, I even question myself sometimes, like, what if everyone feels the way that I feel? Tired,
Yeah.
lethargic, low energy. What if that's just normal? And I'm just a baby and I can't
Oh, I
handle it.
see. I see.
And but he's like, "But look at what all you've been through. Obviously there's something wrong." But like, I even question it sometimes, like, what if what I feel is normal and it's what
Yeah.
everyone
Is
else
everybody
feels and I
going
just
through
can't
this and
handle
I'm
it?
just so weak, right? Or am I? Yeah.
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 Yeah, like, am I just a wimp and I can't handle it?
No.
So I just sometimes question myself, and then I have to remind myself of, I mean, all the times I've been hospitalized the last year and
No, I'm
having to
sure it's
have my
different.
bladder
I
removed.
can
I
tell
mean,
you that it's
yeah,
not anything. I mean, I probably have my own stuff that I go through that maybe you can't relate with as much, and vice versa. But some of these things that you're describing are completely foreign to me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so everybody I think's got something that they're going with because nobody has perfect health, but they're going through that experience and they're learning to gain the coping skills that they're needing that someone else, if you just all of a sudden just
yeah,
dropped it on them, they'd be like, what are you doing to me? And so no,
yeah.
I don't think that at all. And I know that we've got somebody asked the question. They joined a little bit later. By the way, for those that are joined later, you can go and watch the full recording on YouTube later with our link in our bio. But no, it's not pancreas issue. She's had her bladder removed because she had a condition that led to that. It's called interstitial cystitis, and she's got some other conditions that we've talked about. But that's what led to her having a lot of ulcers and some pain, and ultimately her bladder removed. My daughter had uterine issues. You talk about the the infection. She had double uterus going
Ooh,
into the
yeah,
bladder, and that had to be surgical. When she was young, she was actually in trouble there for for a little bit. And then I've got a friend that's paralyzed, and I think his bladder's no feeling. I think he has a, I don't, is that the right, is it still called a colostomy
Um,
bag? That's more for the colon.
urostomy is for
Oh, the uros.
colon is colostomy,
Oh,
and then
okay.
urostomy.
Okay. I had a
And so I
friend.
do have a urostomy bag now.
Yeah. Because I think
Yeah.
he's got a urostomy bag because it's numb and doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and I had a friend that had since passed away, and he had Crohn's disease, and I think he
Mm-hmm.
had to have removal, and then I think in high school he had a colostomy bag, and I was able to speak at his funeral. So
Yeah.
my heart just goes out to things that people take for granted in terms of just the basic plumbing. When that gets removed, what do you do, right? And then and the
Yeah.
questions surrounding that. So
It,
so
it's been such a life changing, like life altering.
yeah,
And without being like TMI,
sure.
even now to this day, I'll like go to I'll get up, I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom. My husband's like, to
Yeah.
pee?
Yeah,
I'm
well,
like,
the
yeah, I gotta
reaction,
go
yeah,
pee.
because your brain's probably experiencing
Yeah.
something like that, right? It's not like it's just
Right.
going to be, it's not like the other parts of you that's working healthy are going to just be like, oh, okay, everything don't work normally just because this one part of me, you know what I mean? And so it must be
Yeah.
kind of a little bit confusing and disordered kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is. I had to like retrain, my whole thought. And like even now, I'm the type, I've coped with it a lot by joking. A lot of the time, maybe joke about too much, but like my mom, for example, I was with her at a restaurant one day, and she's like, "I gotta go pee. Do you have to go?" And then I just look at her. I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
And
To be like, yeah, come
and
on,
even
let's
for like,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I like to joke and like
Yeah.
give them a hard time about it. But it really, it's life changing. And
Yeah.
you use the bathroom the same way from the time you're potty trained until the time of that. So it's like it was a major change.
Yeah.
And even just whenever like I had my bladder removed, I'll never forget, as soon as I was able to actually eat something, the first thing they brought me was like a breakfast tray, and it had orange juice on it. And like I said, the whole time I had my bladder, I could only drink water.
Yeah.
And it took me, like, every day they would bring fruit juice, and it took me, I think, 4 days before I actually drank the fruit juice, because I was like, nope,
You
I'm not going to chance it. I'm going to
Yeah,
drink this fruit
scary.
juice and it's going to
Yeah,
flare up.
it's interesting that you
And
say that because this friend that and this is information that he shares. His name's Chad Hymus. If those watching want to look him up, but he had to just drink water because if he drink pop, then he would immediately have infect and he I think had a
yeah,
friend die of that. So he had to be really strict with not being able to just
yeah,
drink pop or something, right? Because
yeah. And like with me, it wasn't even just I could only drink water. It had to be alkaline water. So like
oh,
I couldn't drink like Dasani. I couldn't drink Aquafina
that's
because they were
sensitive.
very acidic.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, they were very acidic. So I actually had like drops that you put in water. So if I had to have tap water from somewhere, like at a restaurant, I had drops and make sure that it wasn't too acidic. And if it was, I couldn't have it. And so, and that was hard for people to understand. They're like, oh, just drink this water. I'm like, I can't. They're like, water's water. And I've read things that say, it doesn't really matter because your body processes the alkaline differently. But like me personally, I could tell a difference because at the beginning I was drinking just Aquafina because you could get it at a gas station, and I'd get it on my way to work in the mornings. Then whenever I stopped drinking that and went to alkaline water, it did make some bit of a difference. So um, not only do you have that limit of only being able to drink water, for some people it is you can only drink water and it has to be a certain kind of water.
Yeah.
Um, I was lucky because my tap water is well water, so it's not acidic, and I was able to I would make a gallon of water jug and I would take that to work and I would drink that at work because everything else was too acidic.
Yeah, so
Um,
you're talking about how to cope with the condition. It may or may not have a level of pain with it. Certainly, you can relate to the pain community when you were going through the pain before you had your bladder removed, and I'm
Yeah.
sure in other examples. Now that your bladder is removed, even though there's these various things that you're learning to cope with, up and downward movement, so that you're regulating that and getting used to the urostomy, this kind of thing,
Hmm.
and managing the infections and things. Where do you feel that you still have that chronic pain component to? Because I
Um,
asked I
I,
asked that because I remember one of the things that stood out to me before I even understood a lot of the history, and we didn't even have time in that Zoom call for you to get into the history, but you had kind of wondered whether you were kind of still, you know,
yeah,
part of that, because you had a history of it, but it's like, okay, well, I'm not dealing with. So tell me what you kind of
yeah.
had meant by that.
Well, I do have some phantom pain, and I actually take a medicine that's for like strokes and seizures, gabapentin, and it's like also for nerve pain. So
Yeah, we're
I
familiar
do
with that.
sometimes experience phantom pain, just like someone who loses a limb has
Hmm.
pain in the limb that's no longer there. The same thing with bladders. Um,
Oh, okay.
but I do deal with that some, but not near as much as what I went through. And so at first, and like even on this call before, I was like, well, I don't really know if they'll want to hear from me because
No,
I don't
absolutely
really
not.
have chronic pain every
No,
day.
absolutely
Uh,
not. And let me say why, because Alexandra Bastian, the artist that was on one of our past episodes, um, probably can relate to what you're saying in that regard, in that she has a really significant history of what she went through and almost died. But I don't think that she's dealing with anything now. But she has, so she adds along with you, and this is the way that I would encourage you to maybe think about it, is you add a unique perspective to those that are even maybe still currently suffering with it, because you've been able to gain that experience, and even if it's not something that's happening as frequently, um, you've been able to gain that compassion, and that's a huge ally to someone, where
yeah,
you could say, hey, look. So by no means is that like a, hey, I ooh, owie, I had that, and now I'm all better, and I have no place. Absolutely not.
yeah. And I try to be an advocate. I do. And I think too, not just even this, but something I really do struggle with as well is most people who have bladder removed or colon removed or anything is because of cancer. Anybody, like I remember I returned back to work and I guess it had gotten out that I had my bladder removed, and someone's like, I didn't know you had cancer. And I'm like, no, I didn't have cancer. And one of the things my mom suggested is she's like, you need to find a local support group for people with ostomy bags, either colostomy or urostomy. And I said, Mom, I just can't do it because
Yeah.
so many people had their bladder removed or their colon removed because of cancer. And I'm so fortunate that was
Oh,
not why,
that's not the reason
so to
why.
me, yeah. So like to me,
Yeah.
even though it wouldn't be like a cancer support group, in a way I almost feel like a fraud for showing up
Oh man,
because they're
it just goes to show that human nature in all of us. I don't know if it's possible for us to ever get completely away from this inferior superior categorization, right?
right.
It's like splitting hairs.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we had the same removal of something. Oh, but now you've got the superior because they had it with cancer, and I'm the inferior.
Yeah.
So it's not just a race thing. It's not just a this thing. It's just
Yeah.
with any difference.
And,
I think.
and I think too, which for one, this is a totally true statement. However, the amount of times going through chronic pain and my invisible illness that I heard from people, well, other people have it worse than you, which is true. But when you're hurting and you don't feel good, that's like the last thing you want to hear because your pain, your sickness is valid.
Yes.
That I mean, that's for everyone. What you're
Yeah.
going through is valid. It's
Yeah.
not in your head. It's a real thing, and it's true that other people have it worse than you, but that doesn't make what you're going through any
That's
less
right, and that
significant.
that goes along with what we were saying earlier, is and then
Yeah.
that those are some of the first steps in self care, because it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay to acknowledge it to yourself. It's okay to give yourself permission. It's okay to validate all these things that sometimes we're kind of hesitant to do unless someone else is doing that, right? Like
Yeah.
who are we to be the one that gives ourselves permission, or to say, hey, no, wait a minute, I'm gonna validate that. I know what I'm talking about. This is serious,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Yeah, exactly. So
And I think that, that saying being just put into everyone's head and forced into them has a lot to do with it too, because I think about that, like, well, they have it a lot worse than I do because they had cancer, or people who have chronic pain, obviously they do have it a lot worse than I do, but then I'm like, well, who am I to speak out because I'm not currently dealing with that.
yeah,
But like I had told you, I still have tried to like be an advocate for people, and like I said, that woman with her daughter,
yeah,
speaking out and just saying, hey, please try this. That has helped me a little bit more feel like I have a place, because like you said, I do offer a unique situation and a
yeah,
unique
yeah,
view. And
absolutely.
because I think in my mind, like I said, there's those people before that are in their ignorant bliss that don't have a loved one who has any kind of pain or illness. They've never had pain or illness, and to them, they're oblivious to it. Then you have those that are living it, those that are living it with someone that they love, and then someone who's been on both sides. And so
You get a
I think
mix of all of it.
everyone,
We need all of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
there's various perspectives that help uh,
yeah,
contribute to either a solution of some kind, right? Because
yeah,
what you can't solve or what you can't change, you have to cope with and accepting. And we don't like coping and accepting.
right,
We want change and solutions, but the reality is that you're not going to always get change. You're not going to always, and that goes back to my whole reasoning in that.
yeah,
And it's hard for me to you talk about you did a good job summing up what I was kind of explaining, and that's really what you come. It's the power of acceptance. It's
yeah,
the power of gaining the ability to cope, and
yeah,
ultimately, it's really not what we want. We don't want to cope with something. We want a cure.
yeah,
We want to solve. We don't want to accept something that is not what we want. We want it to be able to be changed to make it what we want, and that doesn't mean that um, that we're all immature or that we're just crybabying like we're not getting something in the store. I think it's just part of human nature. I think it's part of why we're here, to be faced
right,
with those kinds of situations, so that it allows for us to grow and to
and
find ways in which to be okay without just getting everything we want. And I think that can happen. I think that we can
yeah,
be okay in a state of peace or a state of this or whatever, in that space of coping and acceptance. And that's sometimes that could be a wild concept, I think, to some people that are at the beginning of this, and one that maybe even gets rejected. I certainly know I've had my moments where I didn't want to have anything to do with that kind of a concept, right?
right.
But you got to
And
surrender to it, you know.
lots of why me
There
moments.
you go.
Lots of
That's right.
why me, and I hate to say it, why not this
Yeah,
person? Like this person does. You see,
that's right.
anyways, lots of why
Yeah,
me moments, and
exactly. Yeah, you're speaking my language, and that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean you're a bad spouse or a caregiver or a child. It means that you're normal. It means that you're human. It means that that's just part of what I think. Whether you share that with someone else, whether you making that obvious that that's what you're going through, the reality and the truth is, as we have honest conversations, is that that's part of just being us. Everybody is
yeah,
going through that dynamic that we're describing, even though they're not sharing it, they're not talking about it. And the better that we can get of changing our relationship with acceptance and with coping, however you want to think of it,
yes,
um, I think is where our Heavenly Father, my higher power, wants us to spend more time with. I think that we underestimate the peace that can be in that space, the happiness that can
Yeah.
be in that space, the joy that can be in that space. It's not, I think it's a big lie, quite frankly, to believe that all of those things are only when you can fix things and get everything you want. And that's what we kind
Yep.
of are taught in society, right? Is that's where the
Yep.
happiness is just you're going to get everything you want, change everything, solutions, heck with acceptance and coping and surrender, forget that. And then
Right.
you're chasing it because you're caught up in a lie. And so it's
Yeah.
pretty powerful, I think, what we're on to here, so
I agree.
yeah. Well,
But
Chelsea, it's
I will, just to kind of wrap it up.
yeah.
Current day, I mean, obviously still dealing with infections and still dealing with the POTS, finding ways to manage it and just really being on top of taking my salt medication. I told my husband I'm going to get a salt lick, like cows wear around
Oh
their
yeah.
neck,
Yeah.
or the blocks that they lick. I'm going to put it on a little rope, put it around my neck. But you know, I'm just finding ways to control what I can control,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I can, for the most part, control my POTS by wearing my compression socks and eating how I'm supposed to eat and taking my supplements. So I'm controlling what I can control as much as I can control it. Infections, I can't control that. I can drink water, as much water as I need to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can try to, keep everything very sterile when cleaning or changing my supplies. I'm doing everything I can do, but there are just some things that are out of my control, and I'm just spending the time focusing on doing what I can do, controlling what I can control, and just
There you go.
accepting that what I can't control is just going to
Yeah.
happen. And I think that's helped my attitude a lot. Uh, I have made it since March without being hospitalized. So that's my longest period of hospitalization. So that's good.
Very good.
Um,
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
so things are better. They are looking up. So yeah,
Good.
everything's
Yeah. Solve what you
like you
can.
said, a lot of accepting.
Change what you can. Change and solve what you can. Work with others that can help you with that. And if you can't, spend some time in acceptance and coping. There's a
Yep,
place for it, and happiness, joy, and peace doesn't exist without it. And I think that that's
exactly.
kind of the message here. And that might be a hard pill to swallow, but it really, I think, would speak true to anyone listening to this. And I know, particularly with me, because I've been terrible at that. I've fought that for a long, long time,
Yeah,
and I'm working on that myself. Because sometimes you just want to change and solve everything. And
yeah,
if you have those times, and that's you too, don't, again, full circle, don't beat yourself up. Know that that's normal, and other people are having days where
yeah,
they do a little bit better than not. Don't just throw in the towel if you're having a moment where you're tired of coping, you don't want to hear acceptance anymore, and you're going to have those moments, and maybe at those moments, you just reach out to your higher power and you say, hey, look, I don't even know what to ask, I just need help, right? Whatever, right? There's
yeah, exactly.
so
And kind of goes back to, once again, setting those realistic expectations.
yes,
In the moment when you're having a bad day, it's awful. But if you ahead of time have set, okay, this is what's going to happen, and in a way it kind of gives you more control over the situation, because it's not taking you by surprise. You already called that ahead of time, so you already knew that was going to happen. And so I think that kind of gives you a little bit more control too, and help with
yes.
accepting that you're aware of what's going to happen. And when that happens, it's just going to happen. And um, whenever you're having a better time or you feel better, just focus on feeling good in that moment and be appreciative. So yeah.
Wow, you guys, we've been really blessed tonight to have Chelsey on, and
Thank you.
a lot unpacked there, and a lot of great things that, even if it's a reminder for people watching this, and for some it might be some, hearing some of this for the first time, right? And really being something that helps them feel like that they're coming across some truths that will really help them. But yeah, aren't we all just living and walking by grace? We do our best, and
Exactly.
He does the rest, and that's really what I think tonight kind of boils down to. If you summed it up in one word, is that's how powerful the word grace is. I think for all of our unique
Yep.
situations, we just keep doing your best, you guys, and He'll do the rest. And that's a very personal journey that's between you and your Creator and my beliefs. Um, uh, and uh, and just be gracious on yourself too, as we come
Yep.
together and try to strengthen each other. But what a joy having you. I want to,
Well, thank you.
they talked about having like a quarterly, bring back in a Zoom call. And if we get that
Yeah.
organized, then, some of the people that we've interviewed, that would be just amazing to have kind of the Zoom call that we had when we turned to TikTok Purpose. So
Yeah.
watch for that. I think that that's something that we'll plan in time, but watch for the
Well,
recording. It should be on YouTube out
yes.
tomorrow.
And
And
thank you for everything that you're doing for giving
oh,
people the platform to speak. Thank you.
I'll be sure to send that. I know that that's going straight to
Yes.
Nell.
And send
She's
best wishes to Nell.
oh,
Yes.
absolutely,
You guys are
yeah.
both doing wonderful things.
Oh well, thank you, and you're part of it. So thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us, Chelsey. Have a good night. Okay.
You
Okay.
too.
We love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.